Can you all hear me? If you're here, raise your hands. Yeah, we're all here. All right. Fantastic. I need to clear. So, there's nothing like having a food coma and talking about intellectual property. I hope you've eaten a lot. Your two favorite dishes, yeah. Uh-oh. Do you have to turn this on somehow? Do you know? Sorry, Tram. Technically illiterate here. Oh, wait, I think I got it. I got it. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Where's Jeremiah? Jeremiah, are you here? I don't see him in the room. So maybe I won't have to apologize, but I meant to bold his name here and I didn't bold his name. But sorry, pull this over. This is going to be a thrilling conversation around intellectual property, which is obviously, I think, a very important topic when we're talking about open source. I have to start with the obligatory, I am not a lawyer, and I'm also anal. So, never mind. We're here basically to talk about the status on intellectual property, where we're at with the policy, have a little bit of a conversation about it. We have 15 minutes on the agenda. If we do need to go over, because you guys have comments or questions, we can. And luckily, we have a few folks from the committee in the room that are lawyers, but they're not representing MOBI, but they're giving us some feedback and input into this intellectual property standard. So I want to thank a few people before we get too far along in here. Michael Fisher is the vice chair. What a dynamic guy. I got to tell you, he's working on the usage-based insurance. He's on this committee. He's as committed an individual as we have in the community. So really, if you guys happen to get a chance to talk with him, thank him for his contributions. He's really making a difference. Working with Michael is Wanda. Wanda's here representing AOE, right? You don't want to do it? Oh, you're chewing, sorry. Put you on the spot. Anyway, so please thank Michael for his contributions, and thank you for contributing as well. Brad Biddle is actually the attorney that we hired to write the policy for MOBI. I'm going to try to represent him a little bit of what he's done, but he's an attorney who came from Intel, is 100% focused on open source licensing and those types of things. So he does work for the IETF. We have Bayo Tran down here. He does work for IEEE, and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of representation from people who are actually living and breathing and knowing all the case law and those types of things around open source issues, and understands the implications when Obama went out of office and Trump came in, how they're kind of looking at patent protections and things. So very talented guy. We're really happy that he's come on board. Christina, if you want to raise your hand. Christina, you are an attorney, right? Not representing MOBI, am I saying that correctly? But representing the community in terms of like what are the needs and what do we need to be doing. And so thank you. And then Brian Bellendorf, anybody know Brian from Hyperledger? He's commented several times on what we're doing. He's not like a weekly participant, but he's commented through his stuff. He's the executive director for Hyperledger. Jeremiah, did he join us? He had to leave? Yeah. Oh, no. I got 5 minutes. Anyway, so Jeremiah has done a lot in this space in Bayo as well. So let's just talk about our scope. We're working. You know, when everybody's thinking about licensing, I think they jump right to software, right? You're going to use my software. It needs to be licensed if you're going to use it. But actually, these written works and the copyrights around written works are actually as important, if not more important, in this whole open source community thing, which I did not know when we first started out. And then, of course, data is an important topic that we have not gotten to yet. That's why I have it blue up here. These are our goals. We want to, this is kind of the community talking about what the goals are. Obviously, we want everybody to contribute standards. We want them to be incented and encouraged to contribute standards. Obviously, we want to ratify those standards in the proper way, mostly through adoption, right? Standards aren't standards until people use them. We want to be able to make sure that those standards are implemented properly, that they're compliant, if you will. We want to continuously improve those standards, and we want all of you guys to be able to create commercial solutions off those standards so you can come to this resort very often, right? So these are were the goals for the committee. The intellectual property, what did he call that? Profile? No, I can't remember. Format that we kind of settled on with Brad really talks in these 4 quadrants. But first of all, the model is that you own your patents, you own your intellectual property. Even though you're contributing them to MOBI or to the members who work in MOBI, you retain ownership of that, and that's kind of an important thing. But this thing really starts with copyrights. And with MOBI, MOBI's not going to write the software that you all use, right? What we're going to do is write specifications that you use to write software that hopefully GM uses and everybody else uses, right? If you follow me. So our job is to create these specifications. Those specifications in themselves are those written works that we were talking about before, and they need to be copyrighted. And essentially that's what we're doing here is that there's what we call a RANZ, reasonable and non-discriminatory, zero royalty model that we've adopted. So essentially what this says is you're going to, as we create a specification, and that specification uses a patent that you have. The one I keep using is Ford's, I think it's called the right-of-way, it's a right-of-way patent that they have, right? We might write a specification for ride sharing that requires the standard to negotiate rights of way. And we may infringe on that patent, if you follow me. But what this model basically says is that you're going to license everybody to use that specification and use that patent on a royalty-free, non-discriminatory basis, so everybody can use it. Now, what we were asked for from some of the presentations that we gave earlier to the community from Arvid at ZF was that there has to be an opt-out option. So if ZF, for example, has spent millions and millions of dollars on their e-wallet project, they want a way to generate revenues through royalties, right? So there has to be a process in which people can declare that they are not going to do this on a RANZ basis. They're going to do it on something called a RAN basis. So reasonable and non-discriminatory without the zero thing. So what we've built into the policy, which I hope you've all received a copy of, is that you will, if ZF said or Ford said, for this specification that we need to ratify, we're going to ask you guys to opt out, or we're going to ask to opt out on the royalty part of this so that we can charge a royalty. There's a window for you guys to do that within, or for them to do that within. And then they have to publicize what that royalty would be. Because there's nothing like signing up for a standard that you have no idea what the costs are going to be, right? And if I'm not trying to pick on Ford, but if Ford said, if you're negotiating an autonomous vehicle's rights of way in every intersection, it's going to cost you $5 for every transaction, or every time you do that, you probably wouldn't adopt that standard, right? So we have to, this all has to be disclosed, presented before we ratify the standard, right? So that's all this royalty and RANZ and RAN topic. Any questions on that so far? Because that's really very important in this. And am I representing this correctly, Christina? I can't believe Jeremiah left. He's such a passionate guy. He would have been talking about this all day. Okay, anything else on this? Any questions? Any thoughts? Fantastic, I'm doing a great job. All right, so then licensing, as I said, MOBI's not going to have a lot of software that we've written that we're going to license the software for you. But what we will have probably are contributed reference implementations, that if you take that reference implementation from, let's say, Ethereum or Hyperledger, and do a direct implementation with that, well, guess what? You're using a piece of intellectual property from MOBI, for lack of a better term, from the community. So that'll be covered under a BSD3 license, which basically is a permissible license, which means you can pretty much do anything you want. You can modify it, change it. This is not a copyleft thing. Does anybody know the term copyleft? There's going to be a few copyleft folks here. So copyleft requires that anything that you write from that thing that you licensed now belongs back to MOBI. We're not doing that, right? What we're doing is a fully permissible license. So it's as open as you could possibly be. The other thing that we will be licensing is probably test beds. So you'll probably, as we move along, we develop these standards, picking on you, Nick, GM will probably implement that wallet in their car, and we will ask them to certify their implementation using a test bed, using some kind of code that we end up writing as part of the specification. And that's all licensed, okay? And it's licensed on this permissible basis, BSD3. The last thing, in this is a fun thing. I'm out of minutes, aren't I? Way past, no, sorry. So is this trademark topic. So when we do end up certifying GM's implementation of the MOBI standards specification, we will have a trademark that says they are compliant. It's kind of like Android, right? You do your Android implementation or Apache or whatever it might be. There'll be some form of a trademark. We have a little bit of a problem with MOBI because there are hundreds of trademarked claims for the name MOBI, as you can imagine, and even some that are specifically in blockchain, and even some that are specifically in blockchain for mobility. So we are probably going to come up with a project or maybe a contest to ask the community what are some alternative names, whittle those down, vote on them, those kinds of things. Probably do something like that. So that should be a fun exercise. Yes, Aki?
Why BSD instead of Apache? I
Um,
mean, the primary differences are is Apache 2 is basically BSD 3 plus patent licensing.
I think we had that question when we were on the call, and they said that some things about the Apache license wasn't GPL free friendly, and by going with BSD, that enabled people who had GPL free.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there's a dependency that BSD3 is like the most, you can adopt it and use it in other licensing, the most friendly from that perspective.
One of the, on the copy left, it isn't that nobody would own the code, it's that you have to inherit the license of the code that you're including. So if, and that's where the permissibility of licenses down the chain from GPL down through Apache.
I see. So, are you a lawyer, Todd? No. You play one on television? Sorry. So this is why I'm not a lawyer, because this is a very complicated topic. Please do have your attorneys look at the policy. We do have some minor revisions that we've come up with, and we'll be releasing another version in the next couple weeks probably. So just be aware of that, and just know there's a lot of members in this community who've done a lot of research and thought on this, so there's people you can ask. Yeah, Sebastian.
One question. I mean, regarding like the name MOBI could be used by somebody else. How do you think about the acceptance? So, for example, once we have defined the standard here for utility user-based insurance or whatever, or rights of way or whatever, there are plenty of organizations out there who believe to have the right to make such decisions for a standard, like in Germany, the several authorities. And so how do you manage to create acceptance for a new standard that we generated within MOBI on a global scale?
Well, I think it's this tipping point thing that I was talking about earlier, right? If enough of us are adopting the standard, we'll probably get those guys to at least talk with us. And hopefully they like us and they want to work with us, and they start to participate in that community. I don't think I have an explicit answer of how we're going to force them to use the MOBI standard. I think it's getting them to adopt it. All standards are not standards until you have adoption.
Yeah, the question is if it would make sense to get them into the boat earlier.
I totally agree.
If there's a strategy upon that was more my question.
So I think there's two different groups that you're talking about there. One is standards bodies, and the other is are more like government agencies, right?
Yeah.
So on the standards body side, we don't really have a strategy around that, to be quite frank. Had a great conversation with Ron Resnick from the Enterprise and Ethereum Alliance, and he was sort of looking at it as a competitor, because he was thinking about going into the mobility sector as well. But what he wants to do is work on the technical specification side of things, not the business specifications or the applications. And when we started really talking through the differences between what they would do and what we're doing, there seemed to be more alignment. And so I think this is just, as this matures